So in this video, we're going to talk about solving absolute value inequalities. So if we were to take a look at this note section, it's saying for an algebraic expression x and k is positive, an absolute value inequality is an inequality of the form, and it gives you this, oh my goodness, what does that even mean type of stuff, right? So let's just break down what this is saying. So if I were to take the absolute value of x and set it less than k, well, we know that if it's an absolute value equation, we have to have two equations. We have to have one where x is equal to k, and then the other one where x is equal to negative k, right? So if I have x is less than k originally, so that would be like, okay, I've got x is less than k now. But in order for you to have gotten to that negative k, we think about it as multiplying by -1. So we also have to flip that inequality. So when I flip that inequality, now I have x is greater than negative k. So on a number line, if you were to put a negative k would be less than obviously positive k, right? Because negatives are smaller than positives. So if I were to have x is greater than negative k, then I'm going this direction, and x is less than positive k, I'm going this direction. You can see that there is the overlap. And so, like when we talked about with compound inequalities, this is like the and portion of that. So the way that I like to think about this one is it's saying, well, let me zoom out here a little bit. X is bigger than negative k, right? So x is bigger than negative k, and x is smaller than k. So that's just the way that this is written if you were to write it as an inequality. And so the way that I like to do this is when you go to solve, if this is a less than, you think about it as less than, right? There's an and in there. And so going into solving, if you know that this should be like an and, you let your algebra give you the work, and you keep in mind a way of you to check your work that you should have an and type of graph. All right. Now let's take a look at what the other one is saying. If I have the absolute value of x is greater than k, again, absolute value says you set it up as two equations. And now you have one is positive, one is negative. But remember, if you multiplied by the negative, then you have to flip that inequality. So now you have negative k right here, positive k right here on the number line. X is larger than k. And this one says x is less than negative k. So this type of situation is giving you more of an or type of graph. So the way that I look at this is when you see that there's a greater sign, you say greater, and that's going to be a hint that it's going to be an or. It says x is less than negative k, or x is bigger than positive k. So keeping that in mind, let's take a look at this. If we were to solve number one, the first thing you want to do is be able to isolate your absolute value symbols. So what we're going to do is we are going to divide by -2. Keep in mind that we just divided by a negative, so we need to flip the sign. Now we have an inequality that we can read. See how it is greater than? So our graph should be an or. And if we have an or, that means an interval notation. We're going to have a union, and make sure you include that u. So let's break this up into two equations. So this is k minus 4 is greater than or equal to 3, or k minus 4 is less than or equal to -3. And so if we were to add 4, we get k is greater than or equal to 7. Or, and if we were to add 4 here, we get k is less than or equal to 1. So on our number line, we have 1, we have a 7, we have closed and going this way, closed and going to the right. And then in interval notation, we are going to have negative infinity to 1, bracket, union, bracket, 7 to infinity. So after you isolate the absolute value, go ahead and then solve, create 2 inequalities. Okay, so let's take a look at number 2. This is already isolated. It's already set for me to break it up into 2. So keep the first one the same. The second one, I change it to the opposite, which means I've got to flip the sign and make that negative. I'm going to multiply both sides by 4. When I multiply both sides by 4, I get x minus 3 is less than 8. X is less than, if I were to add 3, I get 11. Do the same thing to this side. I get x minus 3 is greater than negative 8. Add 3. I get x is bigger than negative 5. Okay? Now, if I were to take a look at this, this is less than, so it should be an and, which means there should be an overlap. So if I were to go through, smallest number is negative 5, largest one is 11, x is bigger than negative 5, x is smaller than 11. And sure enough, there's overlap. And so when you have the overlap, it's really simple to turn that into interval notation, negative 5 to 11, and then they are both parentheses.